Maria de Medici, or Marie de Médicis, was the second Medici to wear the French crown following Caterina de Medici. Caterina's crown came to her unexpectedly because her brother-in-law, the Dauphin of France, died suddenly and her husband Henri ended up becoming the heir to the crown. In contrast, Maria's crown, they say, was purchased with Medici gold. From the beginning, Maria's life was filled with both grandeur and tragedy. Born and raised in the glorious halls of Palazzo Pitti, Maria was a daughter of Grand Duke of Tuscany Francesco I and Joanna of Habsburg, the youngest daughter of Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand I. But grief and loss shadowed her from her earliest years. Her mother passed away when Maria was only 3, and when her father Francesco promptly married his mistress Bianca Capello, she and her siblings were placed under the care of a governess in Palazzo Pitti. There she saw the death of 2 more of her siblings. Of her many siblings, only herself and her eldest sister Eleonora had survived into adulthood. Eleonora was 8 years older than Maria, so to her, she was at times more like a mother. So when Eleonora was married off to Mantua, young Maria felt a sense of deep loss. It was then, some say, that she started to show somewhat obsessive and possessive personality traits. Still, she was not entirely alone. There was another cousin in the Palazzo Pitti who grew up with them. He was a boy with striking looks named Virginio Orsini. He was a son of Maria's aunt, Isabella de Medici, and was 3 years older than Maria. And Maria's attachment to him was said to verge on obsession. For Maria, it must have felt like Virginio was the only one left. At this delicate juncture in Maria's life, her stepmother, the formidable Bianca Capello, now Grand Duchess of Tuscany, appointed a companion for her, a young woman named Leonora Dori. She was of humble origin, a daughter of a carpenter, hardly a fitting match for Medici princess by birth. But she had a sharp mind and a keen understanding of human psychology. Leonora quickly perceived Maria's emotional fragility, her dependence and longing for guidance, and she began to weave her influence over the young girl. What followed was, in modern terms, a relentless form of psychological domination that would last Maria's entire life. Leonora's every suggestion shaped Maria's behavior, guiding her actions and decisions with the subtlety of a spider spinning its web. Through Maria, Leonora advanced her own fortunes, quietly amassing wealth and cementing her place in the higher circles of society. She even orchestrated a transformation of her own status, convincing Maria to pay the Galigai family, which was a poor but nonetheless noble family in Florence, to adopt her. So she became Leonora Galigai to join the ranks of nobility. When Maria's father Francesco and her stepmother died, Maria was 12. Cardinal Ferdinando, her uncle, took over the duchy. He took a personal interest in her upbringing, ensuring that her education was methodical, rigorous, and befitting of a Medici, and any European court she might end up, for that matter. Maria proved herself remarkably intelligent. Her curiosity extended to sciences and mathematics, and she also displayed a notable talent in the arts. Painting, music, dance, and even theater captured her imagination. Meanwhile, the Grand Duke Ferdinando, once a cardinal, had left his office to get married and secure his heirs for the duchy. He married Christina of Lorraine, who was a member of the French royal lineage, being the granddaughter of Henri II and Catherine de Médicis. Her mother was Claude of Lorraine, sister to Elizabeth de Valois, who became the 3rd wife of Felipe II of Spain, and Marguerite de Valois, who married Henri IV. Christina, it seemed, was a shrewd and capable woman and managed the ducal household well. She gave birth to 8 children to Ferdinando, But even with the arrival of his own children, Ferdinando still doted on his beautiful and talented niece Maria and showered her with attention and care. By the 1590s, Maria was of marriageable age. She was a highly desirable heiress with considerable wealth, fine education, and striking appearance. Across Europe, she was coveted as a bride by a number of noble houses. Yet Ferdinando delayed her marriage, citing one reason after another. And as this continued, then as Maria entered in her mid-20s, Maria's prospects were dwindling. While this was going on, Henri IV of France was technically still married to Marguerite de Valois, Margot. But by the 1590s, the position of queen had been practically vacant. Henri was trying to get married again with his mistress, Gabrielle d'Estrées, but in 1599, Gabrielle, who was pregnant with Henri's child, met a sudden and mysterious death. Whispers of poisoning was heard around the court. Meanwhile, the annulment of Henri's marriage with Margot was finally approved by the church. So the position of Queen of France was now officially vacant, with no candidate to fill it. And into this sudden void stepped Cardinal, now Grand Duke Ferdinando. The timing was impeccable. Gabrielle's demise coincided almost perfectly with Henri finally attaining freedom to remarry, while Maria, long kept from a suitable match, had now reached an age of 25 where any more delay would be politically untenable. With Gabrielle gone, Henri IV faced a harsh reality. He needed a bride who could bring both wealth and political advantage to a kingdom burdened by war and debt. Maria, heiress of Tuscany, presented an ideal solution. Her vast inheritance could help settle Henri's debts, much of which were owed to none other than Ferdinando de Medici himself. The marriage would relieve France of financial strain. For Tuscany, it was a good way to collect on the loan in the form of a crown, the loan which it might not even be able to collect otherwise. And at the same time, Tuscany could form a stronger tie with France to forge an alliance against the Habsburg, which was in France's interest as well. It was a satisfying solution for everyone, including the French nobles who had long opposed to Henri's marriage to Gabrielle d'Estrées, which would have meant the loss of significant financial and diplomatic opportunities. It was perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. Did the capable Ferdinando, with his vast network of friends in the right places, orchestrate these events somehow? Perhaps Ferdinando was holding Maria in reserve as part of a carefully constructed plan, one that ensured both her suitability as queen and the fortification of his own power. The alignment of timing, opportunity, and interests is striking enough to make one wonder. But that's a pure speculation, a conspiracy theory. But still, there seem to be quite a few of those around Ferdinando. The preparations for Maria de Medici's marriage progressed with a speed and precision that seemed almost preordained. In Florence, grand celebrations were held for days. Her entourage set sail from the port of Livorno, arriving in Marseille to a lavish reception. Then they continued overland to Lyon, the site of the royal wedding. 2,000 attendants accompanied Maria, a spectacle of power, wealth, and Medici grandeur. Awaiting her there was Henri IV, by this time already a man of 47. Maria, a mere 25, approached the first meeting with the king with the solemnity that was ingrained in her by her Florentine upbringing. When she first saw Henri, she instinctively knelt, observing the formalities of French custom she studied. Henri, in contrast, was a man who couldn't care less about ceremonies, so he just held her arm to lift her up to stand and gave her a big hug and held on to her. He said something about welcome and affection, and at this, Maria was bewildered, surprised, and overwhelmed. Henri had spent the first night with her right on that day, even before the papal legate arrived to perform the wedding ceremony. The ceremony itself was held a week later at the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist on the banks of the river, followed by another week of festivities. Then the journey to Paris began, and by the time they reached Paris, Maria, now called Maria de Medici, was already pregnant. When Marie arrived at Louvre, she is said to have been rather disappointed. Louvre at the time was not the grand palace we now see today. It was much smaller and not as richly decorated back then. So compared to the Palazzo Pitti of Florence, the Louvre seemed almost modest to Marie, nothing like what she had imagined based on the power and prestige of the country like France. By the time Marie arrived, her relative, Catherine de Médicis, had already died 11 years before, so the two Medici queens of France had never met each other. And the circumstances of the arrival of the two Medici women were very different. Catherine had to endure the scorn of the French nobles, and through the years she mastered restraint and learned to conceal her pride beneath a veneer of patience. Catherine was a queen forged in adversity. Marie, in contrast, was born into nobility, a daughter of a Grand Duke and a granddaughter of the Holy Roman Emperor. She was imbued with the pride of her lineage and an unquestionable sense of superiority. For her, most of the French court seemed far beneath her. Still, below her noble and proud exterior, there were vulnerabilities left from the tragedies in her family. She had the tendency to develop obsessive attachments, possibly formed by the repeated losses in her childhood. When she was young, she had clung desperately to her cousin, Virginia Orsini. Now, as queen, she found herself equally possessive of the attention of Henri IV. But the king was a notorious philanderer, ever indulgent, ever capricious in matters of love. And so the marriage of Henri IV and Marie de Medici, so perfect in all political aspects but so wrong on personal level, began. And we will see how that marriage played out in our next video. So please like and subscribe to continue receiving more stories from history, and check out our playlists for stories from other countries and periods. It really helps a small channel like us.